My name is Maya, and I've always believed family was everything. Growing up in a small, close-knit neighborhood in Denver, my life was anchored by my mother, Sophia, a kind-hearted seamstress who sacrificed everything to raise me and my younger brother, Leo, after our dad passed away. Our home was modest, filled with the scent of fabric and the gentle whir of a sewing machine, and it was a sanctuary of love and hard work. Before moving to the entire story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. In my early 30s, I married a man named David. He was charming and ambitious, the kind of person who filled a room with his energy. His mother, Clara, however, was a different story. She was a woman who saw the world through a ledger, calculating every action and interaction. I tried to win her over, but she always treated me like a new hire she was hesitant to trust. "That's not how a proper household is run, dear," she'd say with a smile that never reached her eyes. My life was a balance of working as a physical therapist and saving up for a future home with David, who managed a small construction business. My brother Leo lived nearby with his family, and he was my constant source of support, always ready with a joke or a hand to lend. Then the unimaginable happened. My mother was diagnosed with advanced Parkinson's disease. The woman who once moved with such grace now struggled to walk and care for herself. I couldn't bear the thought of her in a facility, so I brought her into our home. David grumbled about the disruption, but I was determined. Clara was even less understanding. "You're making this difficult for everyone," she scoffed. "People pay professionals for this." For the next 18 months, my world shrank to the confines of our house. I juggled my full-time job with round-the-clock care, waking up before dawn to help my mother, assisting with her medications and pureeing her meals. My hands were always chapped, and my back ached from lifting and assisting her. Leo helped as much as he could, bringing over groceries or sitting with Mom so I could catch a few hours of sleep. But David distanced himself, spending more and more time at his business, claiming he was too stressed to handle the situation at home. Clara's visits were brief and critical, always pointing out how my mother's illness was draining our household's energy and resources. The emotional toll was immense. The person I loved most in the world was slipping away, and I felt utterly alone. The guilt was a heavy blanket, a constant question of whether I was doing enough. Then, one quiet evening, my mother passed away peacefully in her sleep, her hand in mine. The funeral was a blur of tears and platitudes. David stood stiffly by my side, and Clara dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. In the weeks that followed, grief consumed me. The house felt empty without my mother's presence. The betrayal came a month after the funeral. One evening, David called me into the dining room. Clara was seated at the table, a manila envelope in front of her. "Maya," David began, his voice devoid of warmth, "we need to talk about the expenses." My heart sank as he slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a meticulously itemized bill. It listed expenses for utilities, groceries, and even a charge for emotional support and inconvenience. The total was over $10,000. Clara's voice was a sharp whisper. "It's only fair, dear. You can't expect us to carry the full financial burden of your family's problems." My blood ran cold. The rage that boiled up was hot and blinding. All my sacrifices, all the love I had poured into my mother's care, were reduced to a financial transaction. The indifference and cruelty of it were staggering. That night, alone in the guest room, my anger solidified into a cold, hard resolve. I wouldn't cry or scream. I would act. I immediately reached out to my brother, Leo. "They did what?" he whispered, his face a mask of shock and fury. I began to document everything, discreetly gathering financial records, emails, and texts. I confided in a colleague who knew a family law attorney, and she put me in touch. It turned out that a spouse's hidden assets are a key factor in divorce cases, especially with evidence of financial and emotional abuse. My plan began to take shape. I opened a new bank account and had my paycheck directly deposited there. I played the part of the dutiful wife, smiling through gritted teeth, letting them think I was simply processing the shock. Then I found the evidence that would seal their fate. Hidden accounts showing David was using my savings to invest in a business venture behind my back, and text messages with Clara openly discussing their plan to financially exploit me. I filed for divorce, citing financial coercion and irreconcilable differences. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense professional, was a godsend. We subpoenaed records that exposed David's hidden assets and the under-the-table business dealings he was involved in. Clara's so-called loans were proven in court to be gifts with no legal obligation for repayment. On the day of the hearing, David and Clara arrived, looking confident. But as the evidence mounted, their smug expressions crumbled. The judge, a stoic woman, looked at the itemized bill and then at them with open disgust. The case was settled swiftly. I was awarded the house which I had largely paid for, half the value of David's business, and a substantial alimony settlement. The real revenge, however, was just beginning. I used social media and local forums to anonymously share the story of a husband and mother-in-law who billed a grieving widow for her mother's care, linking to public court documents. The community was outraged. David's business tanked, reviews plummeted, and clients disappeared. Clara was ostracized by her social circles, whispers following her everywhere. David tried to beg for my forgiveness, but I felt nothing. "You made your choice," I said, a finality in my voice. Clara called, her voice shaking with disbelief, but I simply hung up. The weight that had been on my chest for so long finally lifted. In the end, David had to sell his business at a loss and moved into a cheap apartment. Clara was forced to downsize. As for me, I sold the house, bought a smaller, more manageable one closer to Leo, and started a support group for caregivers. My life was no longer defined by grief or betrayal, but by peace and a newfound strength. Justice wasn't about destroying them. It was about reclaiming my own life and finding my power again.